Here we are already at essayette number 9, called The Character, wherein I'll be offering some thoughts about how we might think about that elusive creature and even go about inhabiting it, which is ultimately the primary responsibility of the operatic artist. That's what all the singing acting is about. As usual, I'll just go ahead and read it, answering one question as we go, and then expatiating a bit at the end. The character. In opera, sung actions seek two kinds of credibility. They ask first to be trusted as expressive messages from performer to receptor, and second, as the purposive undertakings of an inhabitant of a stage world, a dramatic character. Since actions do not exist in a vacuum, but are the expressions of a character's drive toward fulfillment, the first kind of credibility depends on the second. When a receptor finds it plausible that if the conditions are as represented, the character's actions will be as represented, the receptor will assent to them at least provisionally. When he finds this not only plausible, but inevitable and urgent, he will assent unreservedly. Like the work, the character is all too easily assumed to exist and to be generally knowable. This assumption is pernicious, both for performance creativity and for critical discussion. Obviously, there is no such objective and enduring entity as the character, somehow immanent in the world. Therefore, nothing can be known of such a creature and nothing stated. Stage characters are the offspring first of the engagement between the first and second interpreters, that is, between the creator and the performers, and second of the interactions among all the interpreters embarked on the work. Thus, the character is no more of a fixed reality than the work itself, or the word-note relationship. It changes with every new interpreter, every performance, every new interaction. Nonetheless, the character has an offstage half-life, in much the same sense as the work itself. As with all aspects of the work, the character assumes its first form in the imagination of the creator. There, the glimpse of a person is caught, a sense of a certain way of being, a certain story to be told. In opera, these glimpses and senses have customarily originated on the literary side of the process. Nearly all operas have been derived from literary or theatrical works, or from real-life, unquote, situations whose narratives have surfaced. Often, in fact, they have been taken from literary or theatrical works that are in turn derived from real-life narratives. The characters and their stories, at least in outline, have thus passed through 2 or 3 pre-interpretations before reaching their musical creator, the composer. But this is not an inevitable sequence. A character can arise from a musical wisp, a melodic or harmonic fragment, or a characteristic color. In any case, the composer works on his interpretation in the manner of all creators. He makes choices, each of which stands in the stead of all others. He generates a progression of such choices until he has realized as fully as he can the story and way of being of the person glimpsed at the outset. Much about this realization will be surprising, for though the creator pursues his original vision, each choice presents unforeseen consequences that cannot be ignored. Creators often speak of a moment in their process when characters begin leading independent lives, dictating their own fates to the creator. This means that the chain of choices of expressed character objects has generated a logic that can lead in only one direction. The sense this direction is determined from the outside is an illusion, but one that is experientially real. No matter how skillfully and meticulously the librettist and composer have done their work, the character of the text is incomplete in relation to their vision. Words fall short, notes fall short, word notes fall short, and no excessive musical articulation, inflectional instruction, or stage direction will make up the shortfalls. An unexpressed differential remains. To a reader of the text, this differential is unknowable. The character is his to interpret from the text. And operatic characters are as open as those of a novel or play script to interpretation and incorporation into a reader's inner life, free of interpretive intervention. But, as with everything about the work, the readers of these characters must be literate in the language of word notes and their musical environment, and conversant with the sound world the notations evoke. For this reason, operatic characters lead their textual lives in narrowly restricted circles, and when devotees speak of operatic characters as if they were known, they are usually referring to the attributes found in common among interpreters of the role. Among the receptors attempting to incorporate the character are the performers themselves, whose task it is to embody their interpretations. They go about this in two stages. The first involves examination of the text for all of the suggestive interpretive evidence it can be made to yield. The second embraces interaction with the other interpreters in rehearsal. The second is actually more important for the general vitality of performance, but the first has much to do with how complete and individual the performer's version of the character will become. That's the homework we assume we're all doing. The manner in which character is presented in music has gone much variation in opera's 400-year history. So has the relationship between character and the rest of the musical setting. Sung character actions take many forms, but all these forms have two conditions in common. The first is that they are committed in the singing state of being and must reflect that reality behaviorally. The second is that their vocal component is expressed through song, through strings of word notes with their expanded inflectional range. As we have observed, this range is peculiarly adapted to the expression of otherwise inexpressible emotional and sensory nuance. Indeed, it lingers with such nuance, exalts it, and does so in a band of color accessible only through singing that is streaked with abstract descriptive hues. Opera proposes that it is within this emotional and sensory sphere that we most truly and urgently live, no matter what the appearance of reality may be, whatever the denotative meanings of words uttered. And it's at this point that Steve has a question that I think I should try to answer, and it is this. It's in reference to my assertion about opera's emotional and sensory sphere in which we most truly and urgently live. Steve asks, and I quote, "Is this uniquely true of opera as an art form?" Unquote. As I describe it, I think so. But to say it of all opera, of all periods and styles, may raise an eyebrow or two. It may seem, for instance, that in a stretch of recitativo secco, we have not come very far above the quotidian plane of communication. Or the same might almost be said of the line of declaimed opera that we can trace to some Russian sources, like Darkovitsky's The Stone Guest, or some of Mussorgsky's more extreme experiments with realism, like The Marriage or The Fair at Sorochinsk, and which lead down at least as far as Janacek's In the House of the Dead. There's also a distinctive thread in the French tradition, born in the Tragédie lyrique of Lully, and resurfacing after all the grand opera ruckus in Pelléas et Mélisande, in which the vocal line is conceived less as song and more as a highlighted form, a heightened form of French theater declamation. But even in such pieces, or with the Sprechstimme of Schönberg and Berg, The fact that the utterances are notated already lifts them above the level of speech recited over music, what we call melodrame, or if you wish, rap. And then it is set into a musical environment that always takes them beyond, and in many cases far beyond, any plane of reality we could associate with spoken theater, even of the poetic or highly rhetorical sort. Each of the stage arts, the ones I call the arts of the act, which takes in spoken theater and dance as well as opera, establishes a set of conditions for a stage world that it asks us to accept as grounds for belief and participation. A way of showing us to ourselves in ways we can't quite formulate, can't make entirely coherent in the pursuit of our lives. And within these art forms, each style or school, each creator's body of work, each individual work, further specifies its set of conditions, its rules of realization, and proposes that we enter into them for the sake of whatever of value might be found in there. In opera, when we arrive at what we still usually think of as the standard repertory, reaching back to Handel and reform operas of Gluck, and then Mozart, and on into the romantic and veristic forms, we are certainly in a region in which the range, power, and virtuosity of the voices, as well as the power and complexity of the orchestral and choral writing, have established a stage world that sweeps us up onto another plane of experience. We are taken there by the music and the voices. This plane is essentially exalted, its emotional pitch feverish. It has a strong erotic element and an awareness glimmering around the edges, even when it's not front and center, of mortality. In it, the bell is always about to toll for me and thee. In this realm, words continue to mean what they mean under more mundane circumstances, but that meaning has been left far behind, so as to speak the last of our worries, and also the least of our joys and triumphs. And opera says, this is where we really live. This is what's ready inside us to burst out, and it's more real than anything else. It's not only that opera has a different way of inducing emotion and meaning, but that it induces emotion and meaning peculiar to it, not accessible by other artistic means. So, while all other art forms have their own ranges of expression, their own emotional and sensory spheres, unquote, brought into the world only with the conditions that they establish, operas are, yes, I would say, unique to it. Back to the character. It is by its power to bring this sphere to the fore, and through the relationship of word to note, of sung line to musical environment, show its ongoing centrality, that opera, for all its evident artificialities, stakes its claim to artistic honesty and profundity. Operatic characters and their actions, therefore, must believably occupy a stage world wherein their emotional and sensory lives, animated and described by music, are asserted as truths that override other considerations and generate the conflicts that are essential to drama. Operatic drama, as a rule, does not hold these truths to be separate from everyday reality. It rather acknowledges their importance within it. Its conventions are attempts to penetrate through the everyday to levels of greater, not lesser, truth and reality. An oft-cited example is also a useful one: the convention of presenting the thoughts and feelings of characters simultaneously in groupings, ranging from the duet to the massive ensemble finale. Something that, as Victor Hugo ruefully noted, is far beyond the reach of spoken drama. This is an impossibility in strictly naturalistic terms, yet it is also undoubtedly what is really taking place all the time, everywhere, with all of us. In opera, this reality is expressed through the music, even as the everyday reality and the denotative level of meaning never quite slip from view. Beyond the word, yet born of the word, and containing the word within it, dwelling with inflectional extravagance, and tethered to the denotative, transcending the world of everyday, yet happening within it. These are the dichotomies to be resolved in the person of the singing actor. That is the end of the essay, but it leaves hanging many questions about how our singer-actor goes about becoming the character. The things I've touched on till now, like the trio of exercises on the text, oral interpretation, and personal imagination I discussed back in episode 7, or the reference to my blog post on how to be Gilda, have dealt with our sources of interpretive choices or on the aspects of character that are drawn from within, that have to do with placing oneself inside the subjective experience of the character in her circumstances, and then responding to the events of the story as they come upon her. That, to my mind, is the most important part of the process, so far as character is concerned. It involves going out there as the only person you can be, yourself, but then taking yourself far into the life of someone else in a whole different set of circumstances. If the singing actor really does that, so that she is in her imagination living that life, the essential emotional impact of the character will be conveyed, and the necessary connection between the performer and the sympathies of the audience will be established. This holds even if one is playing an unsympathetic character, an antagonist, Iago, let's say. Because if you're in Iago's skin, you have located yourself in parts of the human spirit we all share in some degree, but keep under control or secret. Even if you're a really sweet guy and devoutly religious, there's some part of you that somewhere, sometime, has for a moment been filled with envious rage, has wanted, just for a second there, to see someone destroyed, that has decided the whole God and heaven thing is a cheat and a joke. After all, Iago doesn't think he's evil, or even if he recognizes that he is, he thinks that's justified, that it's true. Son scellerato perché son uomo. I'm a villain, I'm wicked, because I'm human. And because everyone in the audience is also human, and has had some of these same moments that they keep under wraps most of the time, they're kind of thrilled to see it all put out there, to see that part of our humanity honored, so to speak. Anyway, as soon as we mention Iago, or any of the characters of Otello, or any of the characters of all of our operas of the canon, we are speaking of people, of times, of other times and places, other codes of behavior, manner, dress, personal presentation, performative inclinations. So what about those things? What we might think of as externals. After all, there have been great actors, directors, teachers who believed in working from the outside in. Stanislavski, who we think of correctly as the father of working from the inside out, paid lots of attention to makeup, costume, little defining quirks of character based on observation. Shaliapin, very much on Stanislavski's wavelength, was a great master of makeup who used to take 3 hours to do his own makeup for the radically different characters he played, and said that with each new layer of grease paint or shadowing or facial hair or prosthetic, he could feel himself becoming more and more the character he obviously felt from the inside, but also envisioned from the outside. So here's another exercise. It's called the portrait exercise. Go to a good art museum, or if you must, to the color plates of some great art book, Or, if you absolutely must, to some high-res online source, but really I urge the museum because no reproduction fully captures a painting's aura, as Walter Benjamin pointed out so long ago now, or can draw you in exactly the same way. And pick out a portrait you find intriguing, a representational one, obviously, not, a Picasso, and preferably not a contemporary one, a period portrait. Study the portrait closely, the pose and angle of view, the position of every body part, the focus of the eyes, the makeup the subject is wearing, the background, where is the subject, what's around him or her, and the clothing. Really take it in and try to imagine how it felt to be in that pose, in those clothes, and what sort of occasion this was that inspired the portrait. And for the exercise, try to become the portrait. Dress yourself as closely as you can to what the subject is wearing, making whatever substitutions you need, including undergarments, for which you may need to do a bit of research, and assume the pose as precisely as you can and see how it feels. Check it all out in the mirror. Now stand up, if you weren't already standing. See how that feels. Move around a bit, see how that feels. And now, for our purposes, sing something, or even just vocalize. In a more advanced version of the exercise, you now go on to create the next 2 minutes of the portrait character's life, and in an even more advanced version, one that might be used in a workshop for a production. A number of you create the characters you're going to be singing, acting, and improvise a group exercise based on some predetermined conditions. It's dawn on a street in Montmartre, for instance, or morning in the Russian imperial court, to cite 2 works I've written about recently, Louise and Boris Godunov. So that's presenting a pretty high level of organized training, but you can do the solo portrait exercise all by yourself and maybe have it critiqued by a fellow performer you know doesn't have it in for you. Like all these other exercise ideas, it's just a small part of building a craft of singing acting, learning how to take full possession of the materials you must work with. And the next essayette, number 10, is called Drama, which inevitably means conflict. So no doubt we're in for more along these lines next time.